Welcome to Arcane Station. I'm your host, Mike Porter, and tonight we're going to be taking a tour of some of the most dark and mysterious castles in the world. Fortresses that, according to legend, were not built simply to defend kings or repel armies, but to seal away evil. Our journey takes us from the shadowed forests of Bohemia to the boglands of Ireland, from the mountains of Austria to the fjords of Norway, and into the ruins of France. Along the way, we'll stop at a few other sites, from Mexico to New England. All of these locations share in a strange theme. Each location has its own history of spirits, witches, demons, or even Nazi occultists. Each one has attracted investigators, skeptics, and believers who've tried to measure the unexplained. And in every case, we're left with the same question. Are these places merely monuments to superstition, or are they truly prisons built for the unseen? So let's begin where one of the world's most infamous hellmouths are said to lie, in the Czech Republic at Houska Castle. Houska Castle sits in the forests of Bohemia, about an hour north of Prague. At first glance, it looks like many other Gothic castles of the 13th century. Pale sandstone walls rising above the trees, with towers looming against the sky. But as you approach, its strangeness reveals itself. Many of the windows are false, bricked over with stone. The walls are strongest on the inside, not on the outside. Inside the buildings, there are no kitchens, no water source, and no fortifications that would make sense for a siege. In fact, the castle doesn't even seem to be designed for people to live in at all. Local folklore explains why. Long before the castle was built, the site was feared. At its center was a vast limestone chasm, so deep that villagers called it bottomless. To the medieval mind, a hole without end was not simply a cave, it was a hellmouth, an open wound in the world where demons might crawl out. Stories told of black-winged creatures emerging at night, attacking livestock and dragging villagers into the abyss. Hunters who went missing were said to have been taken by the pit. Some described half-human abominations wandering the woods, returning to the chasm before sunrise. The most famous tale concerns a condemned prisoner. Promised freedom if he agreed to be lowered into the hole, he allowed himself to be tied with ropes, and they pushed him over the edge. He descended only a few yards before he began to scream. When they hauled him back up, his hair had gone white and his face was twisted with age. Within days he had passed. This story does not appear in official records, it's folklore, but it illustrates the terror this place inspired. When King Ottokar II ordered Houska built in the late 1200s, the castle's chapel was placed directly above the chasm, its altar standing on the mouth of the pit. The chapel was dedicated to St. Michael the Archangel, the divine warrior who, according to Scripture, cast Satan into the abyss. Whether by design or coincidence, the symbolism is unmistakable. A holy guardian watching over the gates of hell. Centuries later, Houska's legend caught the attention of a different kind of zealot. During World War II, the SS occupied the castle. Villagers remembered convoys arriving at night, strange lights in the windows, and screams echoing from the halls. After liberation, bones were discovered inside, human and animal, along with scorch marks on the chapel floor. Himmler's Ahnenerbe division, obsessed with cult research, scoured Europe for power places and relics. Whether Houska was used for ritual or research, its reputation only grew darker. Modern investigations have kept the legend alive. In 2009, Sci-Fi's Destination Truth team, led by Josh Gates, spent the night inside. They captured unexplained footsteps and voices speaking Czech, along with equipment malfunctions in the chapel. That same year, Ghost Hunters International recorded faint EVPs, including guttural growls. Several investigators reported sudden pressure on their chests as if something unseen bore down on them. Independent Czech teams in the 2010s found EMF spikes only above the chapel floor and nowhere else in the castle. Skeptics argue that this is suggestibility and echoing acoustics. Believers point out that for centuries people have reported the same things: winged monsters, screams, ritual activity, and voices where none should be. Fact and folklore blur together here, but standing in the chapel above the pit, visitors still say they feel the same thing, that Houska Castle was not meant for kings or knights, but it built as a seal over something ancient and dangerous. We're going to shift our focus into Ireland. In the center of Ireland, about 100 miles west of Dublin, stands Leap Castle, a brooding ruin in County Offaly that is often called the most haunted castle in the world. Its story is not just one of ghosts, but of betrayal, family feuds, occult rituals, and a terrifying entity that defies classification. The first stone structure was raised in the early 1200s by the O'Bannon clan. Local lore says that they chose the site by a test of faith. Two brothers leapt from a rock, and whoever survived would rule. The name Leap is believed to come from Leap O'Bannon, meaning leap of the O'Bannons. The castle later passed to the powerful O'Carroll family, known for their ruthless ambition. The O'Carrolls were infamous even by the brutal standards of medieval Ireland. Chroniclers note constant feuds, betrayals, and assassinations. The castle became the seat of terror, where guests were often poisoned at banquets or executed after supposed alliances. The family's obsession with power seemed to saturate the stone itself with violence. The most infamous act took place in 1532 in what is now called the Bloody Chapel. During Mass, Teague O'Carroll murdered his brother Thaddeus, a priest, by stabbing him on the altar. Thaddeus's blood soaked into the stones, and the family continued their violent reign. But the castle's darkness goes deeper. In the early 1900s, workmen discovered an oubliette, a hidden pit prison, in the chapel tower. Clearing it reveals piles of human bones 4 feet deep, along with rusted swords and stakes. More than 150 individuals had died there. Some were prisoners of the O'Carrolls. Others may have been travelers kidnapped for sacrifice or ransom. What makes Leap stand out from the other castles is not just its bloody history, but its most infamous resident, the Elemental. Lady Mildred Darby, who lived there in the early 20th century, wrote extensively about the entity. She described it as a small, rotting humanoid with hollow eyes and the stench of decay. Unlike a ghost, which usually reflects a past life, the Elemental seems more like a demon or ancient spirit. Folklore scholars suggest it may date back to pre-Christian times, when Druids practiced rituals on the land. Others argue it's a tulpa, a thought form born of centuries of violence. Whatever its origin, encounters with the Elemental are nearly always accompanied by dread and the smell of sulfur or decomposition. Leap has been a magnet for investigators. In 2002, Most Haunted captured a shadow figure in the Bloody Chapel. They reported sulfuric odors near the oubliette and had crew members physically touched. In 2006, ghost hunters heard noises, experienced physical reactions, and observed shadowy activity. Dustin, one of the investigators, was later knocked down near the oubliette. In 2016, Paranormal Lockdown with Nick Groff and Katrina Weidman recorded growls and heavy, oppressive atmosphere in the chapel. Groff described it as one of the darkest presences he's ever encountered. There are independent Irish paranormal groups from the 2000s to the 2020s, consistently reporting EVPs of guttural voices, unexplained lights, and orbs. Many describe the castle as having a living quality, responding to investigators almost intelligently. And as recently as May 2025, Sam and Colby, who have an investigation channel on YouTube, they had not necessarily as dramatic as an investigation as their title might imply, but it does seem that there were a lot of unexplained noises and feelings of unease. Even tourists report unusual experiences. The current owners, the Ryan family, who are restoring the castle, say that while they live there peacefully, the activity never truly stops. Doors slam, figures appear, and the atmosphere in the chapel shifts dramatically without warning. County Offaly is not just home to Lep. The region has a long tradition of thin places, locations where the veil between the worlds are thin. Fairy lore is strong here, with stories of people vanishing into the hills or bogs. In the 20th century, multiple UFO sightings were also reported in the Midlands, suggesting a continuation of portal beliefs into the modern age. So Lep Castle is not an isolated case, but part of a region steeped in supernatural reputation. Whether it's druids, demons, or aliens, the land itself seems to resist rational explanation. From Ireland, we're going to shift over into Austria. High in the Austrian Alps lies Moosham Castle, a fortress that seems pulled straight from a Gothic painting. Its grey towers rise against snow-capped mountains, isolated, cold, and brooding. At first glance, it's beautiful, but its history is among the darkest in Europe. Moosham was built in the 13th century under the Prince Archbishops of Salzburg. For centuries it served as an administrative seat, until the late 1600s when it became synonymous with terror. Between 1675 and 1690, Salzburg was gripped by hysteria. The infamous Jackal trials. Wizard Jackal, or Jacob Kroller, was a young vagabond accused of witchcraft. Authorities claimed he led a coven of beggars, children, and outcasts in a pact with the devil. Under torture, suspects confessed to flying on broomsticks, shape-shifting, and cavorting with demons. At least 139 people were executed. An unusually high number of them were men and boys, a stark contrast to most witch trials. Moosham Castle was the epicenter of this frenzy. Here, accused witches and werewolves were chained, interrogated, and executed. Records show that 15 men were put to death specifically for lycanthropy, accused of slaughtering livestock under the full moon. To the terrified villagers, these were not just criminals, but demonic hybrids. The castle's reputation as a prison for supernatural was sealed. Today, Moosham is known as the Witch and Werewolf Castle. Visitors on tours report hearing spectral chains dragging across the floors, the faint sound of sobbing women, and sudden drops in temperature in sealed rooms. The dungeons, with their stone walls still stained by centuries of the damp and rust, are said to be the most active. Some legends claim that the souls of the Wizard Jackal's followers still wander the halls, bound by the devil they were accused of serving. Others say the executions imprinted their fear and pain into the stone itself. Unlike leper Houska, Moosham has not been heavily featured on international television, but Austrian investigators have studied it. Local ghost hunting groups in the 2010s reported faint EVPs of women crying in the dungeons and unexplained battery drains on their equipment. Tourist accounts describe overwhelming dread in the lower levels. Some claim to have felt watched by unseen eyes, while others report the smell of burning, as if fires from centuries-old executions were still smoldering. The Alps themselves are steeped in legend. Tales of the wild hunt, a spectral progression of spirits riding through the skies, are rooted in Austrian and German folklore. Phantom lights, sometimes called the Alpenlichter, are reported in the mountains at night, dancing over valleys like lanterns without bearers. Moosham, with its witches, werewolves, and tortured prisoners, fits seamlessly into this landscape of myth. It's not just a haunted castle. It is part of a broader alpine tradition where the veil between the worlds has always been considered thin. Next, we're going to move over to Norway. And on the shores of Oslofjord, Norway's capital is guarded by Akershus fortress. Constructed in the late 1200s by King Haakon V, it has withstood sieges, housed kings, and served as a military prison. But behind its imposing walls lies a story that blurs the line between history and legend, the hellhound and sacrifice. According to folklore, Akershus was cursed from its foundation. Builders struggled to lay stable walls. Storms destroyed their work. Accidents plagued construction. To protect the site, they performed a ritual sacrifice. A black dog was buried alive in the foundations, its spirit bound to guard the fortress. In Norwegian ghost lore, black dogs are both a protector and omens of death. At Akershus, the phantom hound became infamous. English language accounts call it Malcasian, though in Norway it's usually described simply as hellhunden, the hellhound. Witnesses claimed that to see its glowing eyes in the shadows meant certain death. Soldiers who spotted it during watch were said to die within days. The fortress is also haunted by the Mantelgeisten, or cloaked ghost, a woman in a long robe who appears to guards. Like the hound, her appearance foretells death. Other stories tell of prisoner spirits lingering in the dungeons. During the Nazi occupation in World War II, many resistance fighters were executed within Akershus. Norwegian ghost tours today often include chilling accounts of phantom gunshots and whispers in German along the fortress walls. Akershus has been less visible internationally, but is a staple of Scandinavian paranormal study. Norwegian ghost tour guides report consistent accounts of visitors hearing growls, footsteps, and whispers. Between the 2000s and the 2010s, EVP recordings captured faint German voices, possibly tied to World War II executions, and whispers in Norwegian calling guards by name. Tourists report sudden cold winds in summer and phantom footsteps during solitary walks, and an oppressive feeling in the dungeons. Norway is a land of deep myth. The concept of hell, the underworld ruled by the goddess of the same name, is woven into Norse traditions. Ghost dogs appear throughout Scandinavian folklore and are often tied to churchyards and crossroads. Oslo Fjord itself has its mysteries. Tales of phantom ships appearing in the mist, sometimes interpreted as omens of war. Even in modern times, UFO sightings are reported across Norway, some clustered near fjords like Oslo's. Akershus, then, sits not only as a fortress of stone, but as a spiritual nexus, blending medieval sacrifice, Norse myth, wartime death, and modern hauntings into one enduring legend. From Norway, we move over to France, and in western France, near the town of Colette, lies the ruins of Château de Tiffauges. Its crumbling towers once belonged to Gilles de Rais, a man once celebrated in life and damned as a villain in death. Born in 1405, Gilles de Rais was a nobleman and warrior. He fought alongside Joan of Arc during the 100 Years' War, serving as her commander and protector. For this, he was hailed as a national hero. But after Joan's death, Gilles withdrew into his estates, where between 1434 and 1440 he was accused of crimes so monstrous that his name became synonymous with evil. Court records claims that he abducted, abused, and murdered scores of children. Servants testified that he dressed in ritual robes, performed black masses, and attempted to summon demons by name. Under questioning, de Rais confessed to horrific acts, admitting to sacrifices intended to bring him wealth and favor. Whether every detail was true or exaggerated by his enemies, his reputation as a child killer and occultist became a legend. Locals say that the ruins of Tiffauges echo with children's cries at night. Dark figures are seen pacing the battlements. Some claim Gilles' spirit is still there, chained to the demons he invoked. French historians note that de Rais was deeply involved in alchemy and demonology, pursuits that blurred the line between science and sorcery in the 15th century. French investigators in the 2000s reported EVP recordings of childlike voices. Visitors frequently described sudden nausea or dizziness in Gilles' former chambers. Some ghost hunters claim to capture shadow figures in the ruins, though evidence remains disputed. Tiffauges has not been as heavily studied as Le Houska, but its reputation is enough that many French consider it one of the most cursed castles in Europe. France has had a long tradition of pacts with the devil in folklore, from musicians who traded their souls for talent to noblemen accused of sorcery. The region around Tiffauges is also home to stories of revenants, restless spirits that walk after death. Interestingly, UFO sightings in western France have been recorded since the 1950s, with some clusters not far from the Loire Valley. Whether coincidence or continuation, the region remains a hot spot for strange phenomena. At Tiffauges, legend and fact meet in one of history's darkest figures. Unlike other castles that sealed away evil, this place was where evil was invited in, fed, and given form. Now, I'd like to talk about some honorable mentions here. Not really sure honorable is the correct term, so let's just say some infamous mentions. So first is Belcourt Castle in Newport, Rhode Island. Built in 1894, Belcourt is less of a fortress and more of a Gilded Age mansion styled as a castle, but it's famous for its haunted artifacts. Visitors report chairs that vibrate when no one's sitting on them, phantom footsteps in hallways, and sudden cold spots. Paranormal investigators, including local Rhode Island groups in the 1990s and 2000s, recorded multiple EVPs and unexplained EMF spikes near antique furniture believed to be cursed or spirit attached. Faslane Castle in Scotland is now a ruin on the banks of the Gairloch. Faslane was built near an ancient Celtic burial ground. Folklore calls the site a thin place, where the world of the living brushes close to the other world. Witnesses over the century have spoken of shadowy figures appearing in the mist and disembodied voices calling from the stones. Though no major television teams have investigated Faslane, local ghost hunters in the 2010s documented phantom voices in Gaelic and captured them on digital recorders. This next name is very hard to pronounce, but I'm going to give it a go. The Castle San Juan de Ulloa is in Veracruz, Mexico, and it was built by the Spanish in the 1500s as a fortress. San Juan de Ulloa later became one of Mexico's most notorious prisons. Conditions were so brutal that inmates believed demons stalked the dungeons themselves. Prisoners described shadows that moved independently, whispers in the night, and unseen hands grabbing them in the darkness. Today's visitors report hearing phantom screams and rattling chains. Paranormal tours frequently cite EVPs of male voices crying out in Spanish, "Ayúdame," or "Help me." There's also Pina de Francia Monastery in Spain. Built on a mountain said to be cursed by demons, pilgrims still believe the Virgin Shrine here protects against evil. Then there's Pena Palace in Sintra, Portugal. Surrounded by occult lore and secret societies, its caves and grottos are rumored to be gateways to other realms. Finally, there's Stoll Cemetery in Kansas. Though not a castle, the ruined church is often called one of the world's 7 gates to hell, with legends of Satan appearing twice a year. Everywhere we look, people recognize thin places, spots where the veil between worlds seems fragile. And time and again, humanity responds the same way, with walls, towers, chapels, prayer. From Bohemia's hellmouth at Houska Castle to Ireland's elemental, from Austria's witches and werewolves to Norway's hellhound, and from France's child killer nobleman to haunted ruins across the globe, one truth emerges. When humans confront the unknown, we build. We build chapels over pits. We entomb animals in stone. We raise towers and dungeons, not only against armies, but against spirits. Paranormal investigations bring these legends into the modern day. EVPs, cold spots, sulfuric smells, phantom cries, growls, footsteps, each measured with meters and recorders, yet never fully explained. High strangeness ties them all together. Alpine ghost lights, Norse underworld myths, Celtic thin places, UFO sightings near ancient castles. These aren't isolated incidents, but part of a wider pattern in how humanity perceives haunted ground. So we end with a question. Usually I try to wrap this up with my opinion, but I'm struggling with this one, so we're going to end this with a question. Were these castles merely monuments of fear or superstition, or do they still hold back something dangerous, something waiting behind the stone walls? Perhaps, just perhaps, these ruins are not just relics of the past, but fortresses still standing guard over the gates of hell. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to subscribe and tell your friends. Not only will it help me continue to make these, it will build a community where we can share in the arcane things that the world has to offer. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.